Today's date is February the 28th, 2015, and I feel it's time for me to add some information to the Gap Power website. Information that I've had for over a year. This information is about how I personally believe the gap generator works and just exactly what it is. It has taken me a long time to figure this out, but it takes me back to what I thought was happening at the very beginning. One thing I've discovered about oscilloscopes is that when they're set to check DC, they include any and all AC in the circuit. But when they're set to AC mode, they reject all DC and check AC only. When one sees the 36-volt bank of batteries under this device, it's natural to think it operates on DC. But in fact, it operates on AC. Now for what it is and how it operates. The first thing is, just like a simple and basic inverter, it converts the DC current of the batteries to what is called extra low voltage AC, which is voltage less than 50 volts RMS. So the first thing the gap generator does is convert the DC to AC, which makes it a very simple and basic inverter. Next, the gap generator adds the power it produces to the output side of the system, therefore making it an over-unity device. A simple and basic inverter will create a square waveform on an oscilloscope. Now here's a photo showing two waveforms created by AC. Now there's a couple more, but these two are sufficient for what I need to demonstrate. The one on top is a sine waveform. That's what we have in all our homes. The one on the bottom is a square waveform. Remember me talking about a simple and basic inverter? Well, it creates a square waveform. Let's take a look at just the square waveform. Here's a waveform from my oscilloscope of a test done on January the 24th, 2014 at 1529. Note how it's a square waveform, just like a simple and basic inverter makes. Let's do the math on the numbers displayed on the scope. 35.8 volts times 5.2 amps equals 186.16 watts input, and 35.8 volts times 9.27 amps equals 331.87 watts output. 331.87 divided by 186.16 equals 1.78, or 178% unity, with 145.7 watts over unity. That's for the left coil only. If the right coil had the same items attached, it would be twice that much. 145.7 times 2 equals 291.4 watts over unity. Checking in AC RMS is the only way the oscilloscope displays exactly what's happening electrically with the gap generator. Remember what I said earlier? The one thing I've discovered about oscilloscopes is when they're set to check DC, they include any and all AC in the circuit. But when they're set to AC mode, they reject all DC and check AC only. If DC current is what the gap generator is using and producing, the oscilloscope wouldn't even display it. Here you see the wiring diagram for the setup in the video. I did a total of 30 tests that day. I'll display each for 3 seconds. If you like, you can pause the video and figure the input and output for yourself. CH1 times CH2 equals input watts, and CH3 times CH4 equals output watts. The video in the background is of one of those tests. Now let's watch that video. I'm measuring the input and output for the left coil only, which has 2 heating elements and 1 light attached. The right coil has 1 light attached just to protect the circuit. If this device is not under load, the power produced with no place to go will burn up the relay contacts or blow the fuse. Maybe both. I've done lots of tests charging batteries. As long as they're in a somewhat discharged state, all goes well. As the batteries approach full charge, the load is reduced on the gap generator, which in turn causes the relay contacts to burn up or a fuse to blow. This is where I am with this technology. A very simple thing for someone to solve. The gap generator project needs the expertise of a good industrial electronics technician. Here's a photo showing the results of one of the tests. Here's a photo of the oscilloscope at 742. Here's a photo of the oscilloscope at 749, the end of the test. Here's the same test result with a little more information. After playing around with this device, I've discovered some flaws in my design. Things, if corrected, I'm sure would greatly increase its performance. First, we have friction in the bearings. Here you see a cutaway photo of the type of bearing used on this device. Note the small roller bearings, both the bearing and the slide which they glide on. The magnets on the piston cause these rollers and the slide to become magnetized, which creates friction, and quite a bit. Here you see a photo of a bearing and slide with no magnets attached. Also, you see a weight force gauge displaying 0.15 pounds. This is how much force it takes to push the slide through the bearing with no magnets attached. Here you see a photo of the same bearing and slide with magnets attached. Also, you see a weight force gauge displaying 1.00 pounds. This is how much force it takes to push the slide through the bearing with magnets attached. 6.7 times more force due to the magnetism transferred to the bearing and slide from the magnets. I have what I feel would be a good fix for this situation: plastic bearings with hardened aluminum rods. Here are some close-up photos of what I have in mind. Another problem with the bearing used on this device is oil. Believe it or not, oil can cause friction. I completely removed the oil from all bearings on this device, and there was quite an increase in performance. One more problem. Magnetic force is not on centerline with the piston bearing. Note the single cylinder model and how it is centerline. But again, the magnetic friction on the bearings. Solve this with IGUS bearings. Putting centerline of all magnets on centerline of the shaft will increase performance also. The way the magnets are positioned and matched in power, magnetic neutralization is almost already present. It doesn't take much power at all to operate this device. Almost 2 years ago, I decided to install solar power with battery backup to my home. The first year, it produced an average of 32,000 watts per day. I average using about 24,000 watts per day. The rest is sold to the power company. That's more than enough to operate an average size home like mine. The gap generator, as is, will produce 291.4 watts 24/7. 291.4 times 24 hours equals 6,993.6 watts per day. 24,000 divided by 6,933.6 equals 3.46. So adding 3 more sets of what I now have would produce 27,734 watts per day. I have added a portfolio to the website. It's in PDF format and has information prior to this video. In it, I discussed over unity and is it possible, the superposition principle and how it relates to the gap generator. I also have information comparing the gap generator to other power sources and include my sources of information. In performance of the gap generator, this video supersedes all others.